There's this moment when you're scrolling through your contacts and you realize something strange has happened. Names that used to light up your screen now feel heavy. Conversations that used to energize you now drain you before they even begin. People you once couldn't wait to see suddenly feel like obligations you're trying to avoid, and you start wondering if something is fundamentally wrong with you. Let me tell you something that might sound harsh, but needs to be said. You're not broken. You're not becoming cold or heartless or antisocial. What's happening to you right now is actually one of the clearest signs that you're growing in ways most people never will. You're starting to lose interest in everyone, and that's not a problem. That's progress. See, most people spend their entire lives collecting relationships like trophies. They measure their worth by how many people want to be around them, how full their social calendar is, how many invitations they receive. But what they don't realize is that quantity has nothing to do with quality, and you're finally understanding that truth in your bones. The shift starts slowly. Maybe you notice you're not laughing as hard at jokes that used to crack you up. Maybe you find yourself checking your phone less when certain people text you. Maybe you catch yourself making excuses to skip gatherings that you used to eagerly attend. At first, you might think you're just tired or going through a phase, but then the pattern becomes undeniable. You're losing interest in surface-level connections. You're losing interest in performative friendships. You're losing interest in relationships that require you to dim your light so others can feel comfortable. And honestly, it's about time. This isn't happening because you've become judgmental or superior. It's happening because your capacity for depth has expanded while your tolerance for shallow has completely evaporated. You've tasted what real connection feels like, and now everything else tastes like cardboard. You've experienced conversations that feed your soul, and now small talk feels like slowly suffocating. The people around you might not understand what's happening. They might accuse you of changing, of becoming distant, of thinking you're too good for them now. And in a way, they're right. You've changed. You're becoming distant from anything that doesn't serve your highest good. You are too good for relationships that drain your energy and give nothing meaningful in return. But here's what they don't understand. This isn't about them. This is about you finally honoring the person you've become. You're not rejecting them out of cruelty. You're protecting your peace out of necessity because you've learned something that most people never learn. Your energy is sacred, and you get to choose who deserves access to it. Think about the last conversation that truly excited you. The last person who made you lose track of time because you were so engaged in what they were saying. The last interaction that left you feeling inspired instead of drained. How long ago was it? And how different did it feel compared to the majority of your daily interactions? That contrast is everything. It's showing you the difference between connecting with people who match your frequency and trying to force chemistry with people who operate on completely different wavelengths. And once you feel that difference, there's no going back to pretending that all connections are created equal. You're discovering that most people aren't interested in the things that fascinate you. They're not curious about growth or depth or meaning. They want to talk about the same topics they've been recycling for years. They want to complain about the same problems without ever doing anything to solve them. They want to stay comfortable in their familiar patterns while you're actively trying to break free from yours. This realization can feel isolating at first. You might worry that you're becoming too picky, too difficult to please, too selective with your time and attention. But what's actually happening is that you're developing standards, real standards, not superficial requirements about what someone looks like or what they do for work, but deep standards about how they think, how they communicate, how they show up in the world. You're starting to notice the people who ask questions versus the people who just wait for their turn to talk. You're distinguishing between those who challenge your thinking and those who just want to be validated in theirs. You're recognizing the difference between people who inspire you to grow and people who unconsciously pressure you to stay small. And once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Every interaction becomes a mirror, reflecting back whether this person is adding value to your life or simply taking up space in it. Every conversation reveals whether you're dealing with someone who lifts you up or someone who pulls you down to their level. The hardest part isn't losing interest in people you barely knew anyway. The hardest part is losing interest in people you genuinely cared about. Friends you've had for years who suddenly feel like strangers. Family members whose company you used to enjoy but now find exhausting. Romantic connections that once felt electric but now feel forced. It's not that these people became worse. It's that you became more aware, more honest, more aligned with who you actually are, instead of who you thought you were supposed to be. And that awareness creates distance between you and anyone who can't meet you at your new level of consciousness. This is why growth can feel so lonely. You're literally outgrowing the social ecosystem that used to contain you. You're evolving beyond the relationships that were built around an older version of yourself. And there's grief in that process. Real grief for the connections you're losing, even when you know losing them is necessary for your continued development. But here's what makes this phase so powerful. When you stop forcing yourself to maintain relationships that don't serve you, you create space for relationships that do. When you stop accepting crumbs of connection, you make room for the feast that's waiting for you. When you stop settling for people who only want pieces of you, you attract people who want to know all of you. The universe has a funny way of responding to your new standards. As soon as you decide you're done with surface-level interactions, deeper people start appearing in your life. As soon as you stop tolerating energy vampires, people who actually energize you begin showing up. As soon as you quit trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for you, you discover spaces that feel like home. This isn't magic. This is alignment. When you're clear about what you will and won't accept in your relationships, you naturally gravitate toward people who can meet those requirements. When you stop wasting your energy on connections that drain you, you have more energy available for connections that fulfill you. The people who are meant to be in your life will rise to meet your new standards. They'll appreciate your growth instead of resenting it. They'll be excited about your evolution instead of threatened by it. They'll want to grow alongside you instead of trying to keep you where you used to be. And the people who can't rise to meet your standards will naturally fall away. Not through drama or confrontation, but through the simple reality that you're no longer available for what they're offering. You're no longer willing to pretend that shallow feels deep or that draining feels fulfilling. This process of losing interest in everyone isn't the end of your social life. It's the beginning of your authentic social life. It's the transition from collecting people to curating people, from accepting whatever connections are available to choosing only connections that align with who you're becoming. The loneliness you feel during this transition isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something right. You're choosing quality over quantity, depth over breadth, authenticity over convenience. And that choice requires courage that most people don't have. You'll notice that your phone gets quieter, your weekend plans become simpler, your social media feels less relevant, and instead of panicking about becoming antisocial, you start appreciating the peace. The silence isn't empty anymore. It's full of possibilities, full of space for the right people to enter when the timing is perfect. But here's where it gets interesting. As you lose interest in the people who drain you, you simultaneously become more interesting to the people who matter. Your energy shifts, your presence changes. You stop trying so hard to be liked and start focusing on being authentic. And authentic people attract other authentic people like magnets. You begin speaking differently, not to impress anyone, but because you're finally comfortable expressing your real thoughts. You stop editing your opinions to make them more palatable. You stop laughing at things that aren't funny just to keep the peace. You stop pretending to care about topics that bore you to tears. This shift makes some people uncomfortable, but it makes the right people lean in closer. They recognize something rare in you. A person who isn't performing anymore. A person who has stopped trying to be everything to everyone and started being something real to themselves. The conversations you do have become electric, not because you're trying to be impressive, but because you're finally being yourself without apology. You ask the questions you actually want answers to. You share thoughts you've been keeping private. You speak from a place of genuine curiosity instead of social obligation. And suddenly, the people in your life start revealing depths you never knew they had, or they reveal that they don't have those depths, which is equally valuable information. Either way, you're dealing with truth instead of illusion, and truth is what creates lasting connections. You start noticing patterns in the people who energize you versus the people who exhaust you. The energizers ask follow-up questions. They remember details from previous conversations. They bring new perspectives that challenge your thinking in productive ways. They celebrate your growth instead of questioning it. They match your emotional investment instead of taking without giving back. The exhausters do the opposite. They forget what you told them last week. They turn every story you tell into a story about themselves. They drain your enthusiasm with their negativity, or their inability to engage with anything meaningful. They make you feel like you're carrying the entire weight of the relationship. Once you see these patterns clearly, the choice becomes obvious. You don't need to announce it or create drama around it. You just start gravitating toward the people who add value and naturally distancing yourself from the people who subtract it. This process teaches you something profound about human nature. Most people are sleepwalking through their relationships. They're operating on autopilot, following social scripts they never consciously chose. They maintain friendships out of habit rather than genuine connection. They attend gatherings out of obligation rather than excitement. But you're waking up. You're becoming conscious about who deserves your time, your energy, your presence. You're treating your relationships like investments instead of just accepting whatever returns you get. And like any good investor, you're learning to cut your losses and double down on what's actually working. The people who knew the old you might struggle with this transformation. They liked the version of you who was always available, always agreeable, always willing to settle for whatever crumbs of connection they were offering. They benefited from your low standards because it meant they didn't have to raise their own effort level. But the new you requires more. Not more material things or more attention or more validation. More presence, more authenticity, more reciprocity, more growth, more depth, more genuine care. And if they can't provide those things, then they simply can't access the new you. This isn't cruel. This is healthy. You're not obligated to remain small so that others can feel comfortable with their own limitations. You're not required to dim your growth so that others don't feel left behind. You're allowed to evolve, even if evolution means leaving some people in the past where they belong. The guilt you feel about outgrowing relationships is normal, but it's not necessary. You didn't choose to grow beyond certain people out of malice. You chose to honor your authentic self instead of betraying it for the comfort of others. That's not selfishness. That's self-respect. And self-respect is magnetic. It attracts people who also respect themselves. It repels people who don't. It creates a natural filtering system that saves you from wasting years of your life on connections that were never meant to last. The universe is preparing you for relationships that will actually nourish you instead of just occupy you. Connections that will inspire your growth instead of stunting it. People who will see your evolution as beautiful instead of threatening. But first, you have to make space for them by releasing your grip on what no longer serves you. This phase of losing interest in everyone feels like an ending, but it's actually a beginning. The beginning of your most authentic chapter. The beginning of relationships built on truth instead of convenience. The beginning of connections that feed your soul instead of draining it, it. So, if you're sitting here recognizing yourself in every word I've said, if you're nodding along because this feels like someone finally put language to what you've been experiencing, then you already know what this means. You're not losing your ability to connect with people. You're gaining the ability to connect with the right people. This isn't a phase you need to fix or a problem you need to solve. This is a recalibration, a reset, a return to who you actually are underneath all the people-pleasing and social conditioning you've been carrying around like dead weight. The loneliness you're feeling right now isn't permanent. It's temporary. It's the space between who you used to be and who you're becoming. And in that space, something beautiful is happening. You're learning to be comfortable with yourself. You're discovering that your own company is actually pretty amazing when you're not constantly seeking validation from people who can't even validate themselves. Your energy is becoming your own again. Your time is becoming sacred. Your attention is becoming selective. And that's not something to apologize for. That's something to celebrate. Because on the other side of this phase, the people who find you will be worth everything you went through to get there. They'll meet your depth with their own. They'll match your energy instead of draining it. They'll celebrate your growth instead of resenting it. You're not losing everyone. You're just finally becoming someone worth knowing. And the people who recognize that, who can rise to meet you where you are now, those are the connections that will change your life forever. Trust the process. Trust your instincts. Trust that losing interest in everyone who doesn't serve your highest good is exactly what needed to happen for you to find the people who do.